We are here to talk about a wide and slightly dizzying topic, which is let's master the lens look. I'm interested in knowing what it can mean for you guys. Can you please just tell us how you met and what you've been doing for the last few years together?
So I knew of Toby Tomkins and his amazing work, and I often looked from afar with jealousy that other DOPs could work with him and I couldn't. And then one day I got a show with my director Lucy Forbes called The End of the Fucking World, and lo and behold, Toby, who had graded the first series, was also already attached before DOP to a second series. And yeah, I was excited and thrilled and intimidated to work with him.
Oh.
I'll tell you my side of the story. It felt like Benedict was lumped into working with me on The End of the Effing World season 2. I was extremely nervous when we came to work together because we hadn't worked together before. And obviously it was a season 2 of a very successful season 1, and I didn't know how it was going to go. It's interesting to hear Benedict's side of things compared to mine.
Yeah. And then since then we've worked on a number of shows. I did a show called This Is Going to Hurt, which is a BBC TV show, a slightly abortive moment on a version of Great Expectations, which I left, but Toby continued. And this year's Netflix show, Eric, starring Benedict Cumberbatch, as well as some adverts, which today Toby and I have been in the grading suite doing a Christmas advert for a well-known supermarket brand.
Okay, so your relationship goes back a little bit. How has it evolved over these 5 years? Would you say that it's more straightforward compared to the beginnings?
It's an exponential curve when it comes to collaboration. I think when you work with someone for the first time, there's a steep learning curve, and it either progresses and you gel, or it sort of doesn't. And then anything beyond that is just a refinement. So I think, during the course of an entire, or most of a season of End of the Effing World, that was the sort of steepest time of sort of learning how to work with each other, and then that's just got sort of progressively better. But I don't know.
I think that's accurate. There's quite a lot of life and work which happens for each of us between each of our shows. So it's quite interesting. I feel I develop in that time, and I also see Toby Tomkins develop in that time. We both sort of go away, do our things, respective things for 9 months, and then we get locked in a dark room again together for 3. Just when I thought you couldn't get any better, it gets a little bit better, and hopefully I get a bit better or smarter or something in that time.
My job gets easier.
I made less mistakes.
Yeah.
You can spend more time doing your job rather than fixing my terrible mistakes.
Going back to our ambitious topic, right? Which is about lenses. Do you remember a precise moment in your early career, in your studies or anything, when it clicked in your mind that lenses matter and you should study them in a certain way?
Yeah, I started my career shooting factual entertainment, so kids' TV shows. I didn't really go to film school. I did a TV production course. I guess we used to use 2/3 inch cameras with video lenses on them. They're still quite expensive and high end for what they were, but they weren't the same sort of lenses we use these days. The Pro 35, which is a PNS Technics machine, which came out in around about 2004 or something like that, which you could chuck onto your Panasonic VariCam or your Super 35 glass. And with that came Super 35 depth of field. With that came actual T-stops and prime lenses, which I'd never experienced before. But suddenly the lens became a thing. That opened my eyes to all these lenses. I think probably the first lenses I used were Zeiss Super Speeds, in fact. That's not a lie. I was like, oh wow, look at this. This is cool. These are actual proper lenses. Why does it say T-stop instead of F-stop? What? So that was my moment of lens discovery.
Okay, and you, Toby, do you have any relationship to lenses in your job?
Yeah, definitely. There's an increasing requirement to look at things from a sort of glass to glass perspective. That very complex journey from hitting that front element of the glass to hitting, the final element of a projector. I think that's becoming much more necessary to look at things from a design and lighting perspective. And so for someone that's working in post at the back end, I've always been very interested in the front end as well, because for me, it's a relationship and it's a dance between the two. There's a little bit of a relationship between what lenses can do and what we can now do in post in terms of the sort of bite of an image, the sharpness, stuff like that. Some of the lens characteristics, the softness, the warmth of a lens coating, for example. I guess in the last 15 years, I've been interested about how lenses affect what people want from the end result and where I fit into that journey, and how much of that we're fighting and how much of that we're adding to. There's DPs that love to use master primes on larger, full format sensors, and obviously on the wider lenses there's a lot of vignetting. So I often spend, depending on the f-stop, removing the vignetting and stuff like that. So I always have to have an understanding of why the DP's chosen something, what is an artifact and what is character. It's very subjective, and I think that lens choice is a subjective thing. I think it's truly subjective, and it depends on not just the person but the story, what they're trying to achieve. It's probably the most influential thing in the image making pipeline, except for the grade, obviously.
You went to film school. You are the educated one in the couple, right?
Yeah, I'm the
scholar.
The scholar elite.
You are on your end of the creative pipeline, still influenced and very aware of the lenses that you work with, actually.
Certain DPs, I think Benedict is one of those people that's very aware of that interaction between in front of the lens and after the lens, and where the priorities should be. And I think that's changed a lot over the last 15 years. There's certain characteristics that we can match that we couldn't before.
And which characteristics do you play around the most?
The sort of obvious one is sort of vignetting and edge softness or center sharpness. And then on a more complex level, every lens has a MTF characteristic. With the new spatial tools that we have, the frequency separation that we have, we can increase and decrease the local contrast depending on the frequency. So if you compare lenses, that don't have a flare, roughly the same t-stop, the main difference you'll see is their MTF response on a face and how they resolve fine hair versus pores versus a beard versus some fabric. We did that a little bit on This Is Going to Hurt to increase the pores of the characters, to kind of stress the humanity of these people working in the NHS. And I think that maybe traditionally would have been done with, lenses, harder lighting and makeup.
This work you did on the skins on This Is Going to Hurt, was it something that you had prepared together prior to shooting, or is it something that you discovered afterwards during post?
I mean, I remember banging on about Adam Driver's face in Marriage Story a lot. Bored myself silly with that. Shot on film, not on video. I had no idea how to help achieve that. Obviously, Toby did. It was something which I wanted, and I think Toby found a way to do it and make it look amazing. Really. Did
you test it before, or?
I think we played around with some of the texture stuff when we were building the LUT.
We did a sort of a screen test with Ben Whishaw, the main actor, in one of our sets before we started shooting, and that included a little grade test as well.
It's kind of something I do on every job now, even commercials.
Oh, you do it on a regular basis? You mean working on MTF and changing the local contrast and everything?
And looking at the amount of highlight texture, bloom quality, stuff like this, things that maybe are traditionally thought of as lens characteristics. Although I think sometimes people find it hard to separate the qualities of lenses to other qualities. Like, do you know what I'm talking about, Benedict?
I'm very pragmatic when it comes to lenses. I honestly think people can get obsessed by lenses having some kind of magic quality. So much more is brought to the image by just moving your key light around a little bit, or pushing a bit of coolness in the shadows, or Toby doing a little bit of work. So I think people get very hooked up on lenses, they get very hooked up on filtration, and these things make a difference, no doubt. But in a modern world, a world of LEDs and RGB lighting and fantastic top-end grading suites and things like that, I do think that the sort of special uniqueness of lenses is slightly falling back. I like a lens which has a good coverage, fast T-stop, and a nice selection of focal lengths. I want it to work on the day and not to give me any issues.
It's about having something you can totally control, so like a very neat blank page or...
Yeah, it's going to finish my thoughts. People get really obsessed by the lenses and the filters. They really do. They message me on Instagram saying, what filter did you use on Eric? It was Mitchell Pancro C. And it's fine, people can keep asking that. I'm not against asking it, but people do get really obsessed by it. Whereas actually what really created the halation in Eric was Toby's skills and brain and a load of post-production. You couldn't create that halation in camera. It's not possible with any kind of lens or filter combination.
Even if you did, you would sacrifice detail in the midterm.
And it's also, I used to, when I first started, I used to look at things and go, oh my God, what lenses do they shoot that on? What filters do they shoot that on? I used to get really obsessed by it, and I just really want to know what the secret filter source is. I don't know, now I really go for pragmatism myself.
To sort of counter that briefly, I think there's certain characteristics, but the sweet spot, especially in the more, characterful, let's say vintage glass or repackaged glass and that kind of thing that they're looking for, like very often or not, there's various sweet spots for the idea that they have for that lens in that moment. And then in the realities of especially TV and like a mad schedule, will you get that perfect stop, that perfect flare for that thing based off of that shot that you've seen, that you're referencing, that was shot on the same lenses? But I do think people get a bit poetic about it.
I would love to shoot a job one day where I could have a load of vintage lenses and also some non-vintage lenses for when the vintage lenses were doing too much vintage stuff.
Another man's garbage is another man's treasure. What's the saying? Yeah.
What's the Japanese word for crisis and opportunity? It's the same word. Crisis-tunity.
You're getting poetic, guys. You're really very poetic. How do you manage the fact that the images that you are creating will be seen by an audience and you are supposed to have them react in a certain way? Is it always in the back of your brain and you're always thinking about this third person, invisible person? Or is it just about pleasing the director or the client?
I think it's impossible to guess how everyone will feel.
No, of course.
Looking at something. It's how it feels to the people in the room, but it's also important how it feels to me and if it feels right. I'll often get guidance on how the director wants it to feel. For me, there is an emotional connection to the work that I do on the good days. I don't think you get it every day, but it doesn't feel like an external thing that I'm pleasing.
If one were to think about how many millions of people would watch a Netflix TV show, I think you could easily send yourself nuts. For me, I have a handful of people who I want to please when I'm shooting a show. One is myself. I'm not necessarily serving the audience, but I feel I'm serving the script correctly. That's what I aim to do. It's hard. The audience is quite an abstract thought, whereas am I serving the script correctly? Am I serving these characters correctly? Am I lighting this in a way which is best for these characters and this script? I often get asked what it's like shooting a big TV show, which millions of people are going to watch. Whether you're leading a massive multi-million-pound show or whether you're leading a small, £100,000 an ep BBC Three comedy or whatever it is, it's still at the pointy end of it. It all just boils down to you, a camera, some lights, Lucy Forbes or another director, and a script and some actors.
And did any one of you two get some surprising feedback from someone who watched what you did and told you about something that you hadn't thought about?
Yeah, what it is I often get feedback which surprises me. I don't hate all my work, but I'm nominally okay with my work. But there was a scene in a hospital room and I decided to make it all sort of pink, like a sort of pink dusky sky. Do you remember that, Toby? And it was fine. It just never looked good. I never quite got there. I never got the balance of the interior lights and the pinky sky right. And I just looked at it and went, oh my God, this is shit. I hope no one notices. And Toby did what he could and he made it sort of passable. But I remember about 2 years later talking to my camera trainee, and I remember her saying to me, oh yeah, I loved that series. And I remember one of the scenes was my absolute favorite. It was Alex Lawther in a hospital room and it was always pink, dusky light. I was like, you what? Have you seen into my psyche somehow? You teasing me? But no, she really loved it, and I couldn't stand it. I think it is so nice when people like one's work. It is so good. I barely believe them. I always go, you joking? Are you taking the piss? It's so nice to get good feedback, and it happens regularly. So yeah, that's nice.
Any anecdote on your side, Toby, or?
Actually, this is going to hurt as well. There's a scene by a lake. It was meant to be this sort of romantic sunset dip, and the light had gone, and was there some pickup shoots. It was a nightmare to just get it to flow in the grade. Basically, it was super tough. I was never really happy with it, and like 3 or 4 people was like, "Oh, that lake scene looked incredible," and I was like, "Really? Okay." So it's funny that we both had our insecurities about certain scenes, and people actually loved them. So you never know what people are going to like, and sometimes I don't know. It makes me worry. I'm like, wait, why do people like the things that I don't like? What does that mean?
Yeah, it's a big question. What does that mean, actually? What do people like? How do you keep your imagination going? How do you nurture it?
Inspiration comes from the page. Yeah, I don't know. I really, for me, we need to be inspired by the ideas and artistry of other people. What I do, it's not self-expressive, really. There's a little bit of me in everything that I do, and there's artistry in that. But I guess the short answer is I'm inspired by the people that I work with. When I hear them talk about a project, and I hear their excitement, and I hear their ideas, I'm an inspiration leech, basically, and I will take a little bit of their inspiration, and then I will try and run with that until the end.
Okay.
For me, I'm inspired all the time. I remember a time about sort of 15 years ago when I first started to really get what this job was, where suddenly, it's going to sound really like stupid and cheesy, I couldn't stop looking at the light, sunlight, candlelight, the shapes of it all, how it would fall, suddenly really getting it. And I remember this sort of 6 or 9 month period where I was like, yeah, I get it now. I can see the light. I can see this light doing things, and look at the shape. And I suddenly started to understand it. It sort of suddenly felt like I was sort of inspired by all sorts of things. And I still feel that. I used to look at other people's amazing work and go, oh, where's my turn to do that stuff? It's good to be inspired by that and look at other people's work and look at what fantastic stuff it is, rather than getting torn up but to actually look at it and go, wow, there's a lot of amazing art out there. There's amazing things that people have achieved with cameras and lenses and colorists and lights. One of my old teachers years ago used to say, when you fall in love, you see that person everywhere. When you start a new job, you see that job everywhere, and you see images on a TV or light in a certain way. You go, oh, yeah, that's for that scene. That could be that scene. That, and then you sort of get this sort of inspiration flow going. So yeah, that's my thoughts on inspiration.
Well, it's a very lovely conclusion, right? I think we're good. What do you think? Yeah, the guys agree. They are just nodding very hard. I think I can free you now.